Great. Hi everyone. I'm Daleep Akoi, and I have a lodge in Corbett called Jim's Jungle Retreat. And I'm very excited to share with you our learnings over the last 2 decades. So I'm going to share my screen and start a slideshow. All right. So what you see on your screens now, if you just give me a second, I'm trying to shift this, but I can't. All right. So can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Slide? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
So what you have in front of you is an image of a tiger, ostensibly looks like a tiger. And within it are several other creatures that form the face of the tiger. And Jim's Jungle Retreat is basically a conservation lodge. It's not a lodge that was created purely for tourism purposes. It was created with a thought in mind, and its heart is in conservation. And one way, actually, ideally, to communicate the ideas of conservation is participating and sharing the knowledge that you've acquired. And whether it's acquired knowledge over your own experiences or whether it's acquired knowledge through generations, it's a very important tool to help in the conservation of landscapes, of wildlife, of heritage. So this tagline, "Seek the tiger, find the jungle," is to evoke a sense of understanding that you're coming to see a very sexy animal called the tiger. And what you will leave after you come and explore this forest with us, you will actually find a forest, find a jungle. I just want to sort of enlarge the screen for you to see what I mean. And within the tiger's face, there is an elephant, there are peacocks, there are crocodiles, there's a leopard sitting over here, wild boar, butterflies, pangolin, antelope, snakes, turtles, langurs, birds. There's an entire ecosystem that exists because of a tiger. And if you were to look down at our logo on the bottom of the slide, you see a pug mark, or what ostensibly is a pug mark. And in that pug mark, you see a motif of a fish, which represents aquatic species. The one next to it is that of a snake, which represents, let me just come down to it, yeah, reptiles. Butterflies, which represent insects, and a bird, which represents all the avifauna. And then within the pad, there is a tree and leaves. And again, the communication here is that you have a tiger's footprint, tiger's pug mark, and within that pug mark, because of its existence, all these other elements of a forest exist. You take the tiger away, and you will find a lot of these elements disappearing. That is an ancient learning. That is a learning that we have received from conservationists of the past, from books written by eminent conservationists like Corbett. So what is the Mahavan? Which takes me to what happened with us at the lodge. The Mahavan, as a word, comes from a very ancient text from our Vedas. Actually, more accurately, in the Upanishads. We have books that, these ancient texts that were read by our rishis and our ascetics purely in the forests to understand their existence and their time on this planet. And the Mahavan was set aside as a forest that was sacred, a sacred grove. And there were other kinds of forests as well, the Srivan and the Tapovan. The Tapovan is where you would go into a forest and you would go and do your tapasya. You would leave all your worldly engagements and you would go and meditate. And the Shrivan was a forest that was allocated for your commercial use. You needed forest produce like honey, you needed grasses, you needed trees to create your own homes. So our ancient wisdom told us that they were, of course, the forest was there for your use, but you had to then be mindful of how you used it. And the Mahavan was untouchable. It was your sacred grove, which you wouldn't endanger in any way by exploiting it. So what we call the Mahavan is our forest in Corbett. In Jim's Jungle Retreat, we've created a jungle and we call it the Mahavan. And because of its existence, there is a lot of activity that happens and allows us to actually communicate to our guests what it means to conserve, what it means to be in a forest, what are the relationships that exist between creatures that exist in a forest. And
Zoom meeting.
And those experiences have allowed us to be very sort of green in the way we function. We are sustainable in the footprint that we occupy. Instead of going in for lots of jeep safaris, which is of course the mainstay of people coming to Corbett, there are a lot of walks that we do. And because of this forest that we have here, there are a lot of different experiences that have come out of it. And I'll explain that to you as we go on. But before I do that, I'd like you all to just sort of reflect for a moment about your time in a jungle. And when you go into a forest, it is extremely peaceful. It's a peace that you don't find anywhere else. It's a peace that exists because of the oxygen that you receive. It's a peace that exists because of the way that light behaves in a forest, the creatures that you see and hear. We don't realize that forest trees not only give you oxygen, but they also release certain essential oils in the air. And as you walk through a jungle, you're imbibing those oils and it's creating certain release of hormones in your own body, serotonin, oxytocin, that are making you feel better about yourself. This also helps, therefore, in awakening some kind of a spiritual consciousness. And that's extremely important. That is why our ancient rishis and ascetics went into the jungle when they retired or when they went to meditate. It was because of this awakening that you could very easily encounter if you went into a forest. And everybody who's gone into a jungle and spent time in a forest has then been able to really reflect on what their space is and what their existence means and what their place is in this planet. And they have often gone on to affect the trajectory of history. So who was our inspiration for the Mahavan? There were many people. For me, it was my father. For my father, it was Corbett. For Corbett, it was his contemporaries. There have been a lineage, a past, a history that we have always connected to understand where we come from. I just like to read a quote. India is hopelessly ignorant of the significance of her wildlife, and there is not a single state or province which is contributing anything or making efforts to remove this ignorance and educate public opinion. You realize its responsibility towards creatures which have played no small part in making the country fertile and inhabitable. That was Jim Corbett when he realized that we were logging our forests and we were extracting too much from it and we were going to lose our jungles very quickly if we weren't going to educate the people of India about how important our forests are. The forest isn't just a place where you can get timber. The forest isn't just a place where you can go and see wildlife. It is also a place that sequesters carbon for you. It is a place that creates and holds water, the most important life-giving force. If you were to look at just the Corbett landscape, which is about 1,300 square kilometers, and you were to capture every drop of water there, you would be able to give water through your canal systems and your taps to the entire population of the Delhi NCR. Just 1,300 square kilometers of forest can do that. Imagine if more forests existed, you would never have shortage of water. So Jim's Jungle Retreat is therefore an ode, an homage to Corbett, to Jim Corbett. It's spread on 15 acres. It was agricultural land that has been patiently rewilded over the last 20 years with indigenous flora. And why we've done this is not only to create a space for our guests, but also the real stakeholders, the birds, the insects, the amphibians, the small mammals that have now made this their home. So while we are in a buffer forest, the buffer forest has now been an extension into our 15 acres. So what is our history? As I was referring earlier about everything in life being a continuum, the conscious continuum that we learn from our past, we learn from our masters. This awakened consciousness has come to me through several years of holidays in Corbett. We were taken as kids when we were 2 years old. I remember my first sighting ever. First memory was probably when I was 2 years old. And we'd all packed ourselves into this little Fiat with all our bandobast and all our baggage and everything on the roof. My sister and I, a staff member, our dog, my parents, all crammed in this little car. And we just entered the gate. It was evening. In those days, you could drive in at night. And I remember seeing this tigress with 2 cubs. And my mom, I remember they woke us up and said, look, tiger guys, you got to wake up and see this. And so we I remember waking up, seeing this little cub tripping over itself and falling off the road. And then the mother sort of picking it up with its mouth. And that was my first memory. But we were always going to Corbett for Holi, for Christmas, for New Year. We were swimming in the Ram Ganga. We were fishing. We were sitting on machans. We were going on elephant. We were listening to stories from the rangers around bonfire. And for my father, it was decades earlier. As a school-going boy, he was going to Corbett for his treks and midterms. Before that, these forests were actually blocks that the British, during the British Raj, you could actually go and hunt. And there were different blocks that you could rent, you could lease, and you were allowed to kill a certain number of animals for that season. And my father's uncle, his mother's brother, would organize these holidays. And while my father never hunted, his beginnings were in those excursions into the forest. He's never killed an animal. He's always used a fishing rod. I think, yes, he's killed fish. So we've had lots of fish to eat. But apart from that, there has been no other hunting. And Corbett, in fact, also, while he was a hunter, if you read his books, he had a great understanding of the different ways that animals behaved and the relationships between human beings and animals and the forest they inhabit. And his friend and contemporary F.W. Champion, who was a pioneer in camera trap photography, in fact, convinced him to move away from shooting animals with a gun to shooting footage. And Corbett, in fact, just went wholeheartedly into this. And he's got some amazing footage on the Boar River, which is on the Kaladungi side, of like a family of like, I think 13 tigers, including a white tiger, that he's shot on reel. And there's a documentary that we show at our lodge of that footage. So my father realized, and I remember him telling us, we'd look at the forest and we look at the trees and we'd say, gosh, this is just such a privilege to be here. And he would always say, I don't know how long it's going to last. And we couldn't quite understand why he'd say that, because it just felt so immense, these jungles. But it's true now. I mean, those jungles have disappeared. They've become fragments of what they were. So his idea was to create a jungle retreat that would engage with the guests by giving them a very immersive forest experience. By communicating to them how important these forests are through adventure, through the thrill of knowledge, and also to give opportunities to the local community to work in, if you excuse me 1 second. Sorry, guys. My dog Myra unnecessarily barks at things, and then I have to scold her. So sorry about that. So coming back to why we created this lodge, why he wanted this jungle retreat to exist, it was to give a resource for us, for people who lived in the Corbett landscape, to be able to work and earn a living without having to constantly go back into the jungle and extract things from the forest. So Mahavan was an idea which actually didn't just come out on its own. We always knew that we wanted to create a retreat that was natural, that had trees, that had grasses, that had shrubs, but we didn't quite know how to go about it. So it was a learning process for us. And why I bring this to your notice is that everybody can do this. From the smallest piece of land that you have to the largest acreage that you can afford. Everybody can create forests. And I hope that through this presentation, you'll see the importance of why we should be doing that. So just reflecting again on the people that we have drawn inspiration from. There's of course Corbett, and there's Malcolm Haley, who was his contemporary, and the Governor General at that point of time, who helped create the boundaries of what we know as Jim Corbett, what we know as Corbett Tiger Reserve. There's Billy Arjun Singh in the Dudhwa landscape. In fact, the very fact that Dudhwa exists today is because of Billy Arjun Singh, who used to lease that forest for those hunts that I was telling you about. And he never hunted. So he just conserved the animals. And thereafter, I think Mrs. Gandhi, in honor of his spectacular work, she sort of, and his insistence, she wrote to her several times to make that into a tiger reserve. That we have a Dudhwa Tiger Reserve. In fact, that's probably one of the last remaining natural landscapes in Uttar Pradesh. And if you were to go back 100 years, 150 years, from Corbett Tiger Reserve all the way to Bengal, you know, it was a thick Terai forest, just sort of below the Himalayan ranges, which we've now lost. It was a contiguous forest, and now they're fragmented. And it's really sad, because that means that tigers and other large mammals are going to face peril sooner than any other creature. So how did we go about creating the Mahavan? What was the plan? How did we do it? We first chose degraded land in the Corbett landscape. It was a farmer who wasn't making much, poor fellow, because he was constantly being raided. His crops were being raided. And so we bought these plots of land from him. And the first thing was to create a landscape that would invite the forest's inhabitants back into it. What you can see on your lower right-hand corner is an image of what the retreat looked like when it first started. You can see that there are just a few shrubs and cottages. And this is the a map of the Corbett landscape. And what you can see over here is the Himalayan sort of sub-Himalayan ranges. You see two rivers. You see a lake in the middle, which means a lot of riverine vegetation. You see grasslands, you see thick deciduous forests. The topography is very varied in Corbett, and that affords, in fact, that's what makes Corbett so unique, because it hosts over 500 different species of birds. It has two crocodilian species, the gharial and the magarmach. It has otters, it has the elephant, it has the sloth bear, it has the Himalayan black bear. It has different kinds of civet cats. I mean, it's a very large variety of mammal and bird life because of the varied nature of the landscape of Corbett. And I bring this to your notice because that is what we wanted to do with the Mahavan. And this again is a learning that happened later on. In the beginning, it was just planting trees and creating some kind of a habitat. But then when we thought about it a bit more, we realized that why not create a platform or an exhibit, a living exhibit that mirrored the Corbett landscape. So what we did on our 15 acres is that we created riverine vegetation hotspots around water bodies. We created grasslands, we created thick deciduous forests. And this different level, and of course, within the forest, we had different levels of canopy, from ground covered plants to shrubs, to creepers, to climbers, mid-level trees, and then trees that climb up very high to like hundreds of feet. All of this was then planned out on this map that you see over there. And we zoned it out. And you can do it any way you want. There is no one set formula for this. You live and learn, but you can have a broad outline of what you want to accomplish. And ours was, we want to create a mirror image of the landscapes that exist in Corbett so that we have a living exhibit for our guests. And they can then experience through immersion, through immersive conversations and experiences, what the symbiotic relationships are in the forest and how we can connect to them. So what does the riverine waterhole have? What kind of plants you should create? How do you have different levels so that the water doesn't remain warm and hot? There is a flow that exists inside the waterhole. So there's some part that is shallow, some part that is deeper. So the natural convection of the water happens, the flow happens so that it doesn't heat up too much. Then what kind of plants grow inside and grow around it, and therefore what it will invite when you create this habitat. So this was the creation of a water body. And this is what it looks like now. Then we did another area where we wanted butterflies and insects and sort of see a proliferation of them. So again, it was choosing the right trees, the right shrubs, the right host plants. Butterflies are very particular. They prefer certain plants as caterpillars to eat, to lay their eggs. So there was a whole study that we had to undergo and speak to certain professionals in the Corbett landscape to understand what kind of grasses and shrubs and plants were required to create that kind of a habitat. And this is what we started off with. And this is what it looks like now. So in fact, around March, April, and then October, November, if you come to the retreat, I promise you at least 50 different species of butterflies. And it's just stunning to see what is possible on 15 acres. And within that 15 acres, it's probably just an acre or two. But then what you see develop, there's not much you need to do after that. because it just sort of, life takes its own course and things just start happening magically. And in fact, the trouble is that you have to maintain your grasses, your areas that are grasslands or other sort of geographies that you've earmarked for a particular purpose, because a jungle just behaves the way it intends to. You know, if there's a particular kind of a plant or a shrub that is that really likes the area it's in, it'll outgrow everything else. So there's a little bit of cutting and, you know, removal that you have to do to be able to maintain your ecosystems that you've created. But if you don't want to do that and just let it go wild, I mean, you're welcome to do that as well. So in particular, the grassland and savanna, that was mostly, it's a constant process of maintaining a grassland because it just gets taken over by lantana, by an invasive species. It gets taken over by bacan, which is a tree that just proliferates. It's a cousin of the neem. And while it's a fantastic tree, we have several of them. Bats love it, hornbills love it. But it's a fast-growing tree, and then it grows so quickly, it sort of provides shade to the others, and it doesn't allow the others to grow. And it also is a fairly weak tree, so, you know, a strong storm and it falls and it sort of creates a lot of damage. So you have to find a balance between having bacan and not having it. So this is what the grassland originally started off as. And this is what it looks like now. Of course, in different seasons, the grasses are higher, and there's always something interesting happening because of that. You know, the different kind of mammals that sort of hide in it and stay in it, to the elephants that come to feed on it. And then we have a subtropical moist deciduous forest where you plant a lot of different varieties of broad-leafed trees. In fact, our lodge now has about 37 different varieties of indigenous trees on the property. You know, from haldu, amaltas, kher, kanju, things that grow around us, but also things that were not in this landscape that we brought to it, but exist in the Corbett landscape in totality. So this is how it started. As you can see, it's quite bare. And this is what it looks like now. So while the planting happens and a lot of research needs to happen for it, which we did. This is the notes of Mr. Harkesh Singh, who's a scientific assistant. He helped us identify different grasses, what their uses are, what their symbiotic relationships are. Do humans use it for commerce? What kind of creatures use it for their existence? All this information is now with us, and our own research has allowed us to build a database of information that we now share with our guests. This is a snapshot of what the property looked like probably in year 2 of its existence. This is gosh, what a memory. When we started our nursery beds. So we collected a lot of our seeds from the forest itself in March and April, then again prior to the monsoon. A lot of saplings after the monsoon. You know, the forests have these fire lines. We manage our jungles that way, so that during the dry season, if one part of the forest catches fire, the other parts are protected by these fire lines, which are these broad, sort of open clearings that have been made so that the fire doesn't cross from one part of the forest to the next. So there we got permission from the forest department to collect saplings that had come up over the year. We got a lot of sal from there, and Arjun, Bahera, and a couple of other trees. One thing we've realized that sal is one of the most impossible species to grow, which is the Shorea robusta, on its own. To try and grow it from a seed is almost an impossible task. It's a very, very fussy tree and extremely difficult to look after. And it's so slow in its growth. There's an old saying, I don't know if, I'm sure some of you are aware of it. It's 100, 100 saal khada, 100 saal pada, and 100 saal mara. So it takes 100 years for it to grow. It stands for 100 years. And then when it falls, it takes 100 years for it to decompose because it's a very hard tree. So these are the different grasses that we took from various nurseries around the landscape, put them in our nursery, and then replanted them around the property. Now, creating this natural environment has allowed us now to have over 140 different species of trees, shrubs, and grasses. The water holes have visitors every day. These langurs are chilling out right now, but just last week, there was a python that was inside the water. And our guests were lucky because they saw this kill happen in front of them. And langur baby was drinking water. The python came out, grabbed the langur, and then proceeded to consume it. And I think we were almost a full house that day. Pretty much all our guests saw this occur. And this is not the first time that it's happened. We have, in fact, a trail called the Python Trail because this particular python returns every year. And not only has it eaten langur, it's eaten a rhesus macaque, it's eaten jungle fowl, it's eaten peacock, peafowl, peahen. And in fact, once it even went into our chicken coop, which is next to the staff quarters, and ate 2 chickens. And by the time the staff figured out that it had consumed 2 chickens, they proceeded to pull it out. And there was a small hole that it was being pulled out of. And because the 2 chickens were inside its belly, it wouldn't fit. And they kept pulling and it wouldn't fit. So then the python very kindly regurgitated that chicken. And out came the chicken, and then it was able to be pulled out, put inside a sack, and sent off into the forest. But he keeps coming back, and this landscape is its place as well. So we're happy to have it. This is what the jungle looks like now. You've seen the images what the property looked like when we started, and now the trees cover all the accommodation areas. You can't see one lodge from the other. And it's just a mangle of different levels of forest here. From the canopies down to the ground level. It's just water holes. It's therefore given rise to things that we didn't have to plant. Fungi, you really can't create it, but they've come now because of the forest that we've created. And what you see here is there's the bamboo mushroom, there's the bracket mushroom in the center, the different kinds of mushrooms that grow on the property. There are reptiles and amphibians that have made it their home. This is what you see is a flapshell turtle. We have over 30 species of reptiles and amphibians on the property. If you wanted to know what, I can just go through a list of names. We have the Brahmini worm snake, the Burmese python that I talked about, the common trinket snake, the rat snake, the bronze back tree snake, which is one of the most pretty snakes I've seen. Very thin, sort of a worm-like creature that stays on trees, harmless, but really, really beautiful to look at. The keelback, the checkered keelback, one of the favorite foods for the king cobra, the buff striped keelback, the common cat snake, the crate, which is a poisonous snake, spectacle cobra, king cobra. We have the Indian black turtle, and of course, garden lizards, skinks, and a couple of Bengal monitor lizards who come during the dry season, foraging for eggs and small creatures to eat. We've never had trouble with any creature attacking any of our guests or any of our guests being hurt by them. They stay in their space. And we have these cobbled paths within the property. So each time you walk on them, there's a crunch sound, which alerts the creatures. So if it's a monitor lizard or if it's a snake, they just slither off. All we say is, please be aware in the evenings when you're walking around, always stay on the gravel path and use a torch. And we've never had any incident in the 20 years that we've existed of anybody getting hurt by an animal or an insect. This is a little video of a flapshell turtle in our waterhole. And there's a lovely little experience that has come out of this, which we call mapping the microcosm, the water world. And our guests go through a journey with us, and they go to the different water holes in the property. And there they're told the story of what exists in a water hole, the various different creatures that inhabit it. And it's fascinating how frogs behave, how dragonflies behave, how snakes behave. This is the Burmese python I was telling you about. This guy's not even as big as the other ones that we have. Had the opportunity to cohabit with. But this is the Burmese python. They're really chilled out creatures. In fact, when I was growing up, my father bought a snake, a python from one of those snake charmers. In those days, you could. Now it's of course illegal. And we had a Burmese python as a pet for many years. And the snake charmer had told my father that after X number of years, you have to release the snake into the forest, which we did. But before that, one day, the snake was sort of living with us. So my sister and I, we're twins, we had a room, and then in the room next to us was this python, my parents' third child at that time. And one day they found my sister and I sleeping on the bed, and this python on top of the bed with us. And while my sister was here and I was on the other side, the python was between us, nose to tail, sort of measuring us to see if he would fit inside its tummy. And this, of course, was related to my father by a visiting American professor who he very proudly went and said, "Look at my 3 children sleeping on the bed." And he said, "You better remove that python from there because it's checking out to see whether the kids are fitting inside its tummy." So anyway, next year, the python, who was called Ka from Jungle Book, was released back into the forests of Corbett. And sadly, a year later, we found a tiger had eaten it up. I don't think it could have survived. It probably had lost its ability to hunt, which is another learning. So you never mess around with wildlife, you know. This is a rat snake on the lower corner. Very, very favorite food of the king cobra and the speckled cobra. Again, harmless creature. You see quite a few of them. But we haven't ever seen them come into the property. inside the living accommodations. So as I was telling you about the butterflies, these butterflies that we have, about 70 of them. What you see here is the blue tiger. And then you have the quaker, the commander on the bottom left, the common wanderer, which is in the center, the peacock pansy on the top right, and the common onyx. And these are just a few of the butterflies. Now, you see, there is the quaker, no, come on, the common wanderer. Sorry, the peacock pansy on the top right is sitting on a plant called the kalanchoe. Now, there are certain plants that butterflies will require for them to exist in that space. So if you can plant that particular shrub, you will get that butterfly to be living in your premises. So just a little bit of, digging around and you figure it out. What plants you should be, or grasses you should have for these creatures to make your place their home. The different mammals, that's the Indian hare, kakar. Of course, these creatures you've seen also in your areas like the squirrel, langur, barking deer. Then I wanted to show you some camera trap footage of an Indian porcupine in the waterhole. And oops, that's a civet cat. So we have two kinds of civet, the palm civet and the Indian civet. That was a common palm civet that you saw. And the birds, Corbett Tiger Reserve has over 550 different bird species. In fact, about 50% of the bird species that you can find in India, and about 10% of the world's bird species. So it's, again, because of the different topographies, it's a fantastic landscape for birds. What you see here is a lineated barbet. And here's an emerald dove. The changeable hawk eagle in the bottom left. That beautiful bird in the center is the Indian pitta, jungle owlets, and the grey bush chat. But on our property itself, we have sighted or recorded either passerbys or those nesting 250 bird species. That's a very interesting spider. That's called the signature spider. This is the red cotton bug. And this one, I don't know how to take this thing out, but it's done so quickly. This is a red speckled beetle, this is the blister beetle. And this gorgeous beauty is the red speckled jewel beetle. And this, of course, is the scorpion. The black ones aren't as poisonous as these large black ones aren't as poisonous as the smaller ones. So the larger the scorpion, the less its sting. So don't freak out if you see a very large one. They generally sort of tend to keep away as well. So what did we do with the Mahavan then? We created a functional ecosystem that allowed all these creatures to come into it. We didn't have to bring anything to it, they came. And what did that do? Why did that happen? Sorry, it happened because we created a mixed forest habitat. Like I was saying, it was a mirror of what landscape you find in Corbett. So that beautiful flower you see over there is called the Gloriosa. Below that is the kadam flower. And of course, you see some figs. So you create the ecosystem, and you will have these creatures come and inhabit the space. And you then get to witness all these predator-prey relationships that exist in nature. You know, on the riverbed next to us, vultures come whenever there's a kill. That's a woodpecker sitting on a termite mound. And of course, there's a kingfisher with a frog in its beak. That is a serpent eagle, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check my notes. Sorry, that's a changeable hawk eagle with a jungle fowl on the bottom right slide, photograph in this slide. And the Mahavan also allows a very interesting phenomena to occur, which is pollination. And you can see all these birds on the coral flower. In March, where our grove of coral is, it's a plethora of flowers, of birds. From the sunbird, you see a crimson sunbird and a purple sunbird. You see the drongos, you see the leaf bird. And they form a very important function. Along with that is seed dispersal. And the seed dispersal allows for the trees that we've grown to then be transported through seed dispersal to other landscapes, but also the reverse happens. So a lot of trees that we didn't grow grew because the animals that came into our ecosystem brought it with them. For example, we had a lot, there's a shrub called the ratti. They're small little red and black beads, which were used in the old days as a measuring weight for jewels and jewelry. That's proliferated in the property now. We never used to have that before. We never planted it. Bacan, for example, never planted bacan. What you see that that bulbul on the left, top left, is sitting on a bacan. We never planted bacan. It just happened. So this is an extremely important function. And then, of course, I wanted to just quickly touch upon this lichen that you see on the tree. And what's really interesting about these lichens is that they are an amalgamation of two species, a fungi and an algae. Now, they operate in a symbiotic relationship. The fungus, see, algae mostly are found in water, or that is its host area. Algae exist in water. How is algae existing out of the water on a tree trunk? Because of the fungi. Now, the fungus provides a suitable habitat for the algae, which provides it photosynthetically fixed carbon as energy. So that is how the two of them are existing on this tree trunk. So a lot of these symbiotic relationships, and there's several, which allow us to sort of explore the interconnectedness of things in a forest. And that is the kind of message that we hope that people who come to stay with us take back with them and understand how interconnected this planet is and how we cannot remove large chunks of it. Because then if we remove those, make those holes, then our existence is also in jeopardy. The Mahavans also allowed us to sustain a biodiversity of the forests around us. So tigers are always visiting us, deer are visiting us, pangolin are crossing over. Because we are an extension of the forest, these creatures use us as a corridor to go to other parts of the forest. If we were a concrete sort of a built up retreat, resort, then we probably wouldn't have had the pleasure of seeing all these animals. And because we have the kind of ecosystem that we've created, these are the kind of sites that we get to see. I've sat many afternoons, late afternoons, sitting on a machan and just waiting for these guys to come. In the dry months, in the hot months, they come and use those water holes, to just sit in like a tub. It's the Indian roller, the elephant. That's the Corbett landscape for you. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. If you haven't visited, I urge you to come. Now, we also have had the opportunity, therefore, to change some mindsets of the community that we operate in. Oftentimes, it's really about subsistence, but as people have engaged with us over the last 2 decades, they have also come to share in the knowledge that we have gathered. And a lot of the staff that we have, who are all locals, 95% of our staff is local, they now share this information with their families, which has resulted in better practices at home and how they encounter the forest and how they interact with the jungle. That's Hira Lalji. He's an expert in plants, and the experiences you'll have with them about organic farming or about our nursery and about planting is quite fascinating. They do their own walks, where they talk to you about termite mounds, and all our experiences on the property are sort of low impact experiences that allow you to explore very, very minuscule facets of different ecosystems. But each time bringing you back to the idea that everything has symbiotic relationships and everything is connected. And that's it. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Fascinating stuff, Daleep.
Thank you.
And I wish you had more photos of the Corbett landscape or the videos. Because, one needs to go over there and see what it's all about. But I was talking. You're talking about the snakes eating the what was that creature you mentioned? I was quite surprised that snakes will go after. Now, see, I can't remember what you.
Langur. There was a langur. There was a peacock. There was a chicken from the chicken coop.
No, the langur.
Yes, baby langur.
Yeah, because the python we had here tried to catch a langur, and the langur, literally, even though it was a small langur, but the way it hopped around, the python just couldn't get hold of it. So it just it just vanished after a little while. And we get this family of langurs now and then that come and just hang around and create a little bit of a ruckus and push off. So, but it's fascinating, this Mahavan idea, because the whole of Madhya Pradesh at one time, along with Chhattisgarh and Odisha, was one contiguous forest. Like the Dandkaranya, which was mentioned in the Mahabharata and even in the Ramayana, the Dandkaranya forest. And our side also, we used to have the white tigers, because they used to strain from the Riva forest, and sometimes they would be seen along the banks of the Ganga also over here. But this was many years ago, in the 60s and in the early 70s. But now, of course, the range has reduced so much that they're not, they're not existing in the wild anymore, it seems. So it's all now urban and it's all cut down, which is a pity. But yeah, thanks, Daleep. It was a wonderful experience hearing about how you created this biodiversity. And I'm sure more people can get inspiration from it and try and do it in their own habitats, even if it's a small area, like you said. But yeah, why not? One can, one could probably do all these things if one tried. So, anyone else?
It really isn't difficult. You just have to create a variety of species that you can, plant from grasses and shrubs to trees, and try and make them indigenous varieties, because your gardens can have exotics as well, and they have a function definitely, because they're pollen, they're great for pollen, they're great for nectar. So there's definitely something to be said for having any kind of greenery. The less grass you have, the less lawn space that you have, that's better. So you can try different grasses, different heights, and not just have those grasses that you need to mow and keep. A small lawn patch is fine.
We hardly have any lawns. In fact, because of the extreme heat, we're going through a heat wave almost. So I've recorded about 12 or 13 different kinds of birds that are visiting us nowadays, and at the water trough that we have. But unfortunately, I can never get their photos because by the time I land up there, they just fly off.
Yes, you have to.
Yes. So, and since it's on the way to my office, so I'm treading that path up and down, and they just fly off, and but every time I notice a new species, I mean, some vague bird which I've never seen before, sometimes you see one of those also,
Excuse me, which part of India are you referring to?
I'm in Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh.
Okay.
Eastern UP, and I live on the banks of the Ganga.
Okay.
So we have a large compound and we have a lot of trees and a lot of greenery around. So we even have we have badgers and we have porcupines and all on the campus, and the civet cats. But they've made a mess because they create tunnels under on the cliff face. So there's a lot of erosion now happening when the rain starts, because they've made all these tunnels and holes and stuff like that. So the soil is loose. So when it starts raining, it seems that our house is going to, because it's already tilting towards the river. It's an old 1858 building. So it's already tilting towards the river. So every time the monsoon comes, we think that it's going to, slide into the river or something like that, or fall in. But luckily it's holding on so far. So, it's like that.
Daleep?
Yes.
Just one more question to the gentleman from Mirzapur. Is he staying in the town, or he has just his own sort of a farmland or something? Or,
No, it's not a farmland. It's actually very much within the city. But we have, like I told you, we have a large compound. So we have, and we don't allow anything to be killed except mosquitoes and maybe the odd rat. So all the animals also which are there, like the monitor lizards are there, and we have mongoose and stuff. So they just hang around whenever, and we have the odd snake, like we have a lot of rat snakes, and we have the odd, and we have one python, and we once saw orange, red colored boa, I think it was a sand boa, I think. But I saw that for the first time a few months ago. So, I don't know where they turn up from, but we are right on the bank of the Ganga, and it's a high bank. So the cliff provides them a lot of space.
Yeah, there it is. Very easy to open.
What is it expected by?
Yeah. Daleep?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Daleep, that was a fantastic, mind-boggling presentation. I had no idea of the setup that you have and how much passion and effort that you put into setting up this space. I like the
supposed to
fact
be
that you
watched nowadays.
told us about who your inspiration, the people all behind your inspiration were. And it's just, I mean, you have created such a balanced ecosystem. Hats off to all of you. And thank you for this fantastic presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, Daleep, that was lovely.
Thank you.
And one always enjoys one's stay. And just to tell you, I started visiting Corbett in 1957. First time. Yeah, and I've been going virtually every year, averaging out virtually. So it had just become Corbett. It was earlier Haley. It had just become Corbett around that time. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Lovely talk, Daleep gave. Daleep is my nephew anyway. That's it.
Okay.
Father I grew up, yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for
all.
attending. Thank you. It was fantastic.
How do I get out of this? All right.
Thanks, Daleep.
Thank you.
Our conversation is still due about what we discussed. I think it's just been skipping about both the Toon School event and things beyond that. So I'm going to catch you sometime soon in the next 1 week.
All right. Excellent, Arush. Looking forward to that.
Because I was discussing with him for the event that we could do at Daleep's place, more of a training for the children, and also somehow we can get together.
I think we can talk about all that stuff. You know, we're doing a Young Rangers program. You know, we're tying up with WWF India for the kind of stuff that they do and what we have, and we are sort of melding the two learnings together and creating a program for kids, which we call the Young Rangers program. But that can be utilized by people who are adults as well.
Dan, I'm going to call you tomorrow. I think we'll discuss it either now, summer, or monsoon. We'll make it happen. So
yes,
lovely.
But phenomenal. You know, I've been there all the time, and I keep telling you, it's one of my favorite places for me, my wife, and my kids. My favorite places to go to ever. Like my kids think that it's their place to some extent now because we end up doing so much.
For them, and thank you for bringing them.
Cheers. Thanks, Daleep. Speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
excellent talk.
Thanks.